Well, because we're talking about faith and worship, why don't we start with a word of prayer?
Yes.
Let us pray. Dios, te damos gracias por tus muchas bendiciones. We give you thanks, oh God, for your many blessings, for the gift of new friendships, for the gift of diversity, and for the gift of stories. For it is in hearing each other's stories that we can learn about you, about us, and what it means to be your people. Bless our conversations and our time together. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so today we have a delightful treat. Let me introduce my newest best friend, Donal, who is a native of County Kildare in Ireland. And he has been, Donal Noonan has been living and working in the United States since 2003. And he is the founder and executive director of the Atlanta Homeward Choir and has been serving on the board of NAMVC since its inception. He holds a BA in education from WGU and has just completed an MA in music and music education from Columbia University, Teachers College. Fancy. Donal serves as director of music ministries at the Catholic Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in downtown Atlanta. And he is the founder, director of the Archdiocesan Choir for the Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. He has traveled extensively around the world, performing concerts and recitals with choirs and as a featured soloist. With the Atlanta Homeward Choir, Donal has traveled to Washington, D.C. in 2016 to perform at the White House, and in 2019 to Chicago, Illinois, to sing with our sister organization, Harmony, Hope, and Healing. He has lived in Atlanta for the last 11 years and is celebrating 20 years in America this month, and he misses his hair every day. Mm-hmm. Donal loves musical theater and prides himself on being able to do a one-person production of Rent, playing all the parts in harmony. You cannot beat that. And my name is Claudia Aguilar Rubalcaba, and I am from Mexico City, Mexico. And I am currently serving as Director of Engagement at More Light Presbyterians, and I am your really silly host for today, and I am just so thrilled to be part of this because you are up for a real treat. But before we start with conversation, why don't we watch a video that Jackson has prepared for us?
At the corner of Central and ML King, they wait for the next meal.
Come today to get some hot coffee and warm up the body.
They wait for the rain to pass.
That's what it is.
They wait for life to get just a little bit easier.
Shall we? Here we go.
I see skies of blue.
Donal Noonan wanted to give Atlanta's homeless something worth waiting for.
So I decided to set up a choir to work in conjunction with the shelters, and so I did.
What a wonderful world.
Didn't anyone say to you that's a crazy idea?
Almost everybody. Almost everybody.
Perfect. Jerry Dunson, you got a great voice. Sing it out. Okay.
Marvin Coyne and Roosevelt Jones remember the day Noonan, the director of music at the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, asked them to join his choir.
I was at the front door of the winter shelter, and this tall white guy comes in.
He was like, would anybody like to be in our Christmas choir?
Anybody wants to join the choir, anybody, and I was like...
It seemed a frivolous request for a group whose lives are focused on surviving that next day on the streets. This is the choice they made.
All is gone, all is bright.
I love being in the choir. I look forward to it. You know, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I look forward to coming here and busting my pipes open for an hour.
Son of God and Prince of Peace.
Can they sing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I believe the term is dropping it like it's hot. Yeah, yeah. They're fantastic.
The choir created a shift. It eased the isolation of the streets. Making music was lifting spirits and lives.
Whether you're homeless, whether you live somewhere, whether you are a pauper, whether you are president, it doesn't matter. Music has the power to make community.
Let's welcome our men up here to the steps as we perform for you, ladies and gentlemen, the Atlanta Homeward Choir.
A week before Christmas, the choir has its first concert at City Hall. It's a place they'd never normally enter for fear of being thrown out. They're nervous.
Yeah, I know that they're prepared. I know that they can sing. I know that they're talented. And I know that they're in God's hands.
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere.
The same men so many shrink and turn away from on the streets are now the center, the sound of Christmas.
And it sounds cliche. You know, you see people on TV all the time saying, oh, it's so inspiring, and then you're like, it's not genuine. This is genuine. These guys blow my socks off.
It's a moment of pride in a life often judged. We forget they were somewhere before they were here. Roosevelt designed a bike and spends his days researching and looking for jobs. Marvin is writing a book of poetry and walks the city submitting job applications. And they're not called the homeless choir. The men chose the Homeward Choir, named for where they pray to be someday.
That's my want for them, is that they find home.
So your hope is to lose them?
That sounds really bad, but yeah.
I'm gonna get home. Wherever home is, I'm gonna get there. Happy holidays, thank you, Merry Christmas.
Every homeless person's waking thought is to one day just like not be homeless. So for me, it's a constant thought.
On the corner of Central and ML King, they wait in the shadow of Christmas, within the bricked walls of the shrine, for a few precious hours each week. They belong. They are part of something beautiful. Jay Watson, 11 Alive News.
I get chills. And the thing is, I've seen it more than once, and
Oh,
I still get
really?
chills. So
Yeah, it's great. It really is. It's one of those stories that I keep going back to, and it was the first story that was ever told about the Homeward Choir, and the best, I believe, story that's ever been told about the Homeward Choir, because it was kind of the launching pad for us and the beginning for me to learn how to tell the story. And Jay Watson, who was the journalist, wonderful journalist, who put the story together, she was the one who kind of taught me how to tell other people's stories in their voice, and which is a super important part of telling people's stories, to tell it in their voice and to making sure it's their story that you're telling, and that it's from their perspective and their words. And so, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
So, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the article, just like a little bit of like a condensed 1 minute version. If 1 minute is really hard for the two of us, but
I know.
go for it. Do it 1 minute.
I know. Well, it's fabulous to be here. I'm super excited, and I was so honored when Sally Ann, the editor of the magazine, contacted me and said, we'd love for you to be a part of this issue. And the idea of the topic of this edition was taking down the walls to worship, and taking down the walls, or bringing worship outside the walls of church, was just so exactly what we do with the Homeward Choir. And the Homeward Choir is, like we saw in the video, an organization that works with people who have ever been affected by homelessness. So that's not just people who are currently living on the streets or living in shelters or in temporary accommodations, but anybody who's ever been affected by it. And so it's the idea of putting forward using music as a barrier breaker downer, and using music as a way of opening up worship to anyone who wants to experience it, and taking down all the walls and all of the things that stopped people from being one with God. And with the Homeward Choir, we were able to use the music to form that community, and it wasn't intentionally forming a community of prayer, but it always came back to that. And even though we were a church, I was insistent that the organization remained a 501c3, a nonprofit, so that we could be inclusive of everybody. And but we were able to be inclusive of everybody, but staying focused on faith as well. And because that was just as important for people, especially those folks who were sleeping night after night outside. Their faith was one of the things that really blew me away, of how much faith they had to share with me. And sometimes we had people who if we were singing, they would ask me if we could sing a spiritual, if we could sing Amazing Grace, or if we could sing something in choir practice for them to bring themselves to this place, and I'll just constantly learn from them in rehearsals and stuff like that. So it was a way of, so the article, bringing it back to that, the article was written as a way of kind of demonstrating how throughout the years we've taken down the walls and used the music of worship to form community. And then how we could, within our worship communities, take that to a wider scale and make worship as accessible as possible to way more people. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell what the article is about.
Well, and I think that all you said is also challenging our idea what church is, right? Like, is church like mass? Is church the worship service? Or is church the choir that gives people a warm place to stay and burst their pipes, as one of the guys said? So it's just, if you have not read the article, I totally encourage you to read it. It's like amazing and short and sweet and challenging. And I have a couple of questions for you, and then we're gonna open it up to the whole group.
Can I go back to what you just said, though, before we get to your question? I think church is everything that you just said. There's no wrong answer to that statement. I think that church is literally all of that and more. And there's a group here in Atlanta that, and I can't remember exactly what they're called, but something without, I think it's Church Without Walls. And they meet randomly everywhere. And it's open to those folks who live on the streets, and then other people who choose it as their church, who don't live on the street, who are housed, but they choose that church to come and worship through. And it's just the most beautiful thing to see and worship under a bridge. That's it, because you don't need ornate, you don't need a beautiful pipe organ, you don't need, a phenomenal choir, you don't need, all of the trappings, but you just need community. I think, when we hear where two or three are gathered, I also think that where one is walking down the road, also, one's walking through the frozen foods aisle in the grocery store, I think that God is there too. And wherever you need God, they're there. So anyway, sorry, I just had to jump on that one. I just had to.
Well, and what a beautiful way to redefine what liturgy is, right? Like the work of the people. This is the work of the people, and it's beautiful work, whether you're under a bridge or at the steps of the church or inside the sanctuary. So, okay, let's jump into the questions, but we're already like in it. So people just start writing down your questions. So my first question is, so you start the article with the lyrics of Let Us Build a House, which happens to be one of my most favorite hymns. And this hymn informed, in a way, the article, and in a way, it informed your call to start the Homeward Choir. But are there any other calls to action in the hymns that you sing that the church should be paying attention to and working on?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. The simple answer is yes, obviously. And I want to say in every hymn that there is a call to action, and in every song there is a call to reflection, and in that reflection there is a call to action. Purely because of our faith, there's a call for us to do something, and that do is for us to live faithfully. And what is that faithfulness? And that faithfulness is to the person beside us, and that is to live as we are called by the gospel to live, as we are called by the life of Jesus to live, as we are called by, you know, all of the ancestors who have come before us to live. But the song All Are Welcome, Marty Haugen has written a masterpiece, I think. And I feel that, and I've never met Marty Haugen, and I really would love to meet him one day. I started working at the Shrine in 2012, and the Shrine is shorthand for the Catholic Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in downtown Atlanta. And it's one of these communities that is an oasis. Especially for me, I had before that worked in St. Petersburg and Tampa, Florida, and it was a wonderful place. I loved it. My journey down there was phenomenal. It brought me from Ireland to America, and I met some phenomenal people who will be my chosen family for life. And the communities that I worked in were more on the traditional side, and very much so your run-of-the-mill Mama's Catholic Church. So, and that was very much what I was used to. And so there was I don't want to say there was no challenge, and that there was, of course, your everyday challenges. When I visited the Shrine, purely because my cousin met a good Georgia girl, he moved from Ireland to here. His name is Cathal Doyle, and he runs the night shelter, the Basher Homeless Shelter here in downtown Atlanta now. He met a girl, Jessie Basher, and they got married at the Shrine. So I came up and did the music, and ended up, one thing led to another, I ended up getting the job here. But visiting that weekend, which was Pentecost Sunday weekend, I felt a spirit in the place that was so alien to me that I was just not used to it. I walked in the door of the church, and first of all was just greeted by people, just hellos, like this all-encompassing welcome that was given to me. It was almost uncomfortable, to the point where I didn't know how to process this welcome. And then the preaching started, and the words that the priest was saying in his sermon was so filled with love. And no, I don't want to use the word hate, because it wasn't hate. It's never hate, I don't think, but it's just misinformed doctrine. And I feel that I felt for the first time that I had found the ground within church. Does that make sense? I felt like my feet were finally firmly on the ground. And then for it all to just work out that I ended up a few months later working there as their minister of music, it was just the most insane Holy Spirit thing that I've ever seen in my life. But you know what? It is. I'm very happy with it. Their anthem at the Shrine that I inherited was All Are Welcome. And you've not lived until you've lived with a full congregation singing at the top of their lungs Marty Haugen's All Are Welcome. There's 5 verses to this hymn, and singing every word of every verse. And God help me if I don't do every verse of this song whenever we sing this hymn, because they will come after me. And I'm totally okay with it. And it's just, there's words in a verse that it's lifted house from floor to rafter. And there's people who use their hands, and they're moved. They're moved by the lyrics, and there's people in this place, they live the lyrics of this song, and they own the lyrics of this song. So to bring it to your question, are there other songs in our worship services that call us to action? I feel that there is calls to action in every song that we sing. And even where there's not a direct call to action, there's a direct call for us to realize our faith. And then in realizing our faith, realizing the love of God. And in that love of God, we are called to action, and that is to see the face of Christ in the person beside you, in their dignity and in their worthwhileness, by purely being there. And they're taking up space because it's their God-given right to take up space. And so that respect for their space is just as important as yours. And it is the music of the church that has led me to my faith system. And so it was that, all of those things that kind of helped me, directed me into starting the Homer Choir, because I needed to, I found myself, and I speak about it at length in the article, that I found myself living in a world where people found themselves living in the street, and in this community, it was just all of a sudden the norm for me. And as opposed to me being, oh, I need to do something, I found myself going, I need to fit into this community. I'm the newcomer here, not any other way. Like, I'm the one that needs to fit into their community because they were here first. And now I'm in downtown Atlanta trying to, fit in, start a new life, start a new job. Like, as anyone who works for a church knows, that it's not just a job that you clock in at 10 o'clock and you leave at 6. It's, you're there morning, noon, and night. And you could be there some nights at midnight, and you could be there some mornings at 6 a.m. Or, God knows when you get to leave. It's just the nature of the job. 7 days a week is sometimes. And so you're going to get to know people who are just randomly there. So you have to find a way of fitting in. And so I did. And now I just randomly become Music Man. I'm just Music Man. That's what, no one knows my name, I'm sure, downtown Atlanta. I'm just, hey, there's Music Man. Hey, Music Man. And it's funny too, a few months after moving to downtown, a friend of mine from Florida was driving through Atlanta, and she stopped for lunch, and she parked at the church, and we were walking to lunch, and we were just walking through downtown Atlanta, and there was so many folks who were just like, hey, Music Man. And I was like, hey, and just kept walking. And she was like, what is happening? And I was like, found my community, and it was just, I felt that sense of home too. So I also was the one that found home through all of this. And so, bring it back to your question again, those songs in our worship all call us to action. We just need to be able to open our eyes to see them.
Well, and I just love that, Brene Brown is an author, and she says that there's a difference between fitting in and belonging. And fitting in is just like, you shape yourself to fit in, but belonging is like, as you are, you are embraced. And I feel like not just the man in the choir, but you found the place where you belong. And that's what church should be.
Exactly. And this doesn't go for everybody who joins a new community, joins a new church. Like, anyone who comes through the door of the shrine and I don't know them, I eventually walk over to them and say, hey, I'm Donal. I've seen your face, but we've not met yet. And I'm like, how long have you been going here? And if it's not like 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're like, find your feet, find your seat, and okay, great. Oh, you've been here for 2 months, 3 months. What are you involved in? Let's get you something to be involved in. Because if you're new, you need to get involved in something, because that's how you'll find your belonging. And that's how you'll find your people and your world. And I remember, I had the opportunity when I was much younger to move to Paris for a job. And I didn't last very long because I got so unbelievably homesick. I didn't think that I was a home bird, but apparently I was. It turns out that I thought my French was stellar, and it was absolutely terrible. I walked into the first day there, I saw an oasis, and the oasis was Kentucky Fried Chicken. Jackson, you love that one. Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I went in and I ordered in my best French, and the person responded to me in English. So I was like, okay, I tried. I really tried so hard. But you've to find your church. I went to an English-speaking church in Paris, and I didn't have the courage to get up and join the choir. I didn't have the courage to get up and join any other ministry. Had I done that, maybe I would have lasted much longer than a couple of months, and if I had, I probably would never have ended up moving to America. So God works in mysterious ways. But I often wonder what would have happened if I had the courage to stand up. And it is, I've thought about it at length, and it was a courage thing. I was scared to put myself out there. So I remember that when I, as a leader in community, approach people to get involved, I remember that there might be some fear there. But you know, as leaders, we have to hold people's hands into places in ministry to say, we'll find a place for you, and we'll do this at your comfort level. And you know, that's where community belongs. And the home choir does that too. It's like, you know, I always tell, I think that I have some of the volunteers from the home choir on the webinar today, and they'll be able to tell you too, we never inquire as to people's origins of homelessness, because it's none of our business. It's not, it does, yesterday doesn't matter, today is all that matters. So you're here today, this is all I'm interested in, you know. And the same thing can go towards people who are coming into church for the first time. Yesterday doesn't really matter, I'd love to get to know you and who you were yesterday, but I'm more interested in who you are today and who you're going to be tomorrow. And that's so yeah, I think that's very wise words. It really is, that belonging. Yes, I love that. Yeah.
So people just know that Donal and I had a script, and we're completely going off script, but we're trying to return to the script.
Did we ever have a plan to stick to the script though?
Not really though. We knew that this was going to happen, so we just like had some guiding paths. But really, we're going to get to a beautiful place either way. So my second question is related to how both of our brains work, right? Like your brain seems to work in questions as you try to make sense of the world. So in one paragraph in the article, you ask, and I'm quoting you, as music ministers, organists, accompanists, composers, choral ensembles, and so forth, why have we not been creating space in our worship for the all whom we sing and pray about, in the words of All Are Welcome? And to me, that's such a beautiful and challenging question, right? And since our brains work in questions, let me ask you, who is still missing in the all at the shrine of Immaculate Conception?
Yeah.
And who is still missing in the Church Universal? But more importantly, I want to know, and I know that there's not one answer, how do we open the table to make room for those who we have left outside and stepped on, metaphorically and literally?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. Such a challenging question. That's a question that's called a look in the mirror question. That you have to kind of look at your soul as a church leader, I think, to see who's still outside. I know at the shrine we pride ourselves in being all welcoming and very forward thinking maybe. And I know the Presbyterian Church is very forward thinking, and the exact same, all encompassing, all welcoming. We also need, it's also very difficult to look in the mirror to see where our faults are. And I think that's humanity. I think that's a humanity thing. But there's another saying that says, read the room. And you need to look at your room to see who's not there. And you need to ask yourself, why aren't they there? And I think that would answer your question. And that's a multi-tiered thing. I know for us at the shrine, there's so many people and for so many different reasons. Yeah, the Catholic Church has a long history of people being left outside, but also a long history of people being brought in and cared for. And so it's so confusing. The church in general has a long history of embracing so many people and bringing them inside, has a long history of so much good work, of educating people, of doing so much work to help people make it through in their spiritual life and their physical life, and also has such a horrible history of leaving people outside. So I think as church leadership, it's so unbelievably important for us to be constantly looking to see who's not in the room and to look at our society. And I think right now we're seeing a deficit in young people sitting in the pews and wondering what it is that we're doing that's not enticing. And I think that, you know, especially as musicians, it's something that I bring up in the article as well. It's what is it that's enticing people into worship? Do you remember the movie Sister Act? Do you remember that movie? I can't remember whether it
Of
was
course.
Sister 1 or Sister Act 2. Was there a Sister Act 3? I can't remember. But I don't think there was, right? There was the one with the nuns, and then there was the one with the high school students. The one with the nuns, I think, is the one I'm talking about. Yes. And the first one. And they started doing this type of music in the church. And I think it was like Hail Holy Queen, and they oofed it up a little bit, and they changed up the lyrics a little bit, and Hail Mary, Hail Girls, you know, like that just kind of stuff, which I just think is fabulous, right? And completely irreverent, but funny and relatable, and but like, is it disrespectful? What's perspective? It's different for everybody, right? And so, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I'm going to bring it up again about wedding music in a second, that those people in that movie, they just walked in the door when they heard this music. And so they realized that they were doing something, I'm not going to say wrong, because it wasn't wrong. It was probably really appetizing for a certain group of people. But for another group of people, it's just not appetizing at all for them. So I'm sure they're much prefer to go. We have this running joke of going to brunch. I know personally, I never go to brunch. But the whole brunch joke thing, I'd love to be a brunch person, but I'm not that person.
What kind of person
I
from
know,
Atlanta are you?
I know.
Like, if you don't go to brunch, you're not an Atlantan.
I know. I need to get back my Atlanta card. I live with somebody who absolutely is a brunch person, so I get it, and I have to apologize profusely the whole time. But wedding. We talked yesterday about wedding music, which was a great conversation, and I just recently had who I met with a wedding couple, and they were talking about music, and you know, it was an approach with caution type situation where they were like, well, I just kind of had a question for you as to what kind of music we can have at the wedding. And I'm like, well, you know, we definitely we lean towards live and in-person music, of course, because, you know, and liturgical music because it's a service, and we always want to lean towards that. But tell me what you're thinking so that we can try and bridge what you're thinking, what you want, with what we can do, and all that kind of good fun stuff. And he's like, why would you do that? And I was like, well, it's like this. If you have a song that really means something to you and your fiance, and in 10 years' time, you hear that song in the middle of the grocery store, and that song makes you think of your wedding, and it makes you think of church, and church, that thought of church makes you think of your faith in God, then guess what? We want that to happen. We want you to relate that song to your faith and to your God, and for you to think of your love, and for you to thank God that God has anointed that love. And so it's that cyclical kind of thing, that it's all connected. And so the people who we're leaving outside, we need to know where they're at. We need to know where they're coming from, because our world is a very changed place. And even since 2020, we need to relearn our congregation. We need to relearn how our congregation functions and what it is that keeps them at home, and why they are choosing to stay home. And is that concern over health valid? Is it that they now want to stay home? That's me. I'm becoming that person. I'm choosing to stay home more because I really like my house now, because over lockdown, I made it a comfortable place for me to be, and it became that comfort place for me, you know. So I understand when people don't want to go, you know. And then there's the hot button issues too, you know, like people who get mad because of sexuality, people who get mad because of, you know, other social issues like abortion and other just things like that, that dominate the conversation over it being human. Can we talk about humanity first, the person first? Just like in the world of education, you're educating a child, and you're educating them subject first or child first. Let's start off with child first. shall we? And then worry about the subject. And every child learns differently. Well, every person belongs differently. So you find that person's place of belonging and comfort, and then you show them how home can be. So I think that churches need to read the room. And they need to, by reading the room, it's reading society and reading what's outside the door, and then reading who's inside the door. And then talking to the people inside to say, what are you hearing outside? Who are in your family who's not sitting with you in church? And that is how we can get people to come inside, so that we can be one with them and they can be one with us, because it's a two-way street. We can learn from them as much as they can learn from us, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
It does. And I have a third question, but I want to open up the virtual floor for anyone to ask questions. So please type your questions here and yeah, type them so we can start talking about them. And in the meantime, I'll ask my third question, which is, what would you say to, we talked a little bit and you talk about it in your article about genres and how we separate like all these genres and say like we have the contemporary worship at 9 and the taizé at 10 and all these things. So what would you say to a small church, which is like the majority of our churches, that has like maybe 50 people and wants to include a variety of genres in their worship and incorporate them, but they don't know how to start or where to start? So what would you say to them?
Okay, well, let me just put out one word first, and we're going to come back to it in a minute. And that word is authentic. Okay, let's just let that hang there for a second, and I'm going to come back to it. In the article, I talk about there being a recent conversation about that, say, for instance, you are of Mexican heritage, I'm of Irish heritage, okay? And the conversation being, as an Irish person, I shouldn't be doing anything that's of Mexican heritage music. And you shouldn't be doing anything that's of like Irish heritage music, because is it appreciation or appropriation, right? What is it? And there's validity to that conversation. I don't know the answer to that, but some of the things that I've been thinking about and talking about in great conversation with people, especially like this past summer at Columbia, with just one conversation I had with a peer, and it was preservation of the authenticity of the genre. And I was like, that's phenomenal. That's a great perspective. And it was, and she was really able to shine a light on it for me to be able to see that that is the most important thing for every genre, to have an authentic approach. However, my view of it was, I related it to the Irish language, that historically the Irish language over the years had died off because of lack of use. And there was a certain class of people who still spoke Irish, and they were kind of a higher class of people. And so the lower class per se, and I'm including myself in that, didn't speak Irish. And it was just forgotten about. And now, of course, over the past 20, 30 years, there's been way more resurgence, and a lot more people, the class system has gone out the window, thank God, and a lot more people speak the Irish, and there's been this rejuvenation, and it's just now they have things called like Seachtain na Gaeilge, the Week of the Irish, where everyone speaks Irish for this and celebrates their Irish culture and heritage and all this kind of stuff, and it happens all around St. Patrick's Day, and it's great. That's just one thing. With regards to like spirituals and things like that, there's such a rich history in that genre of music that we sing in church, that it's imperative for us to continue singing those genres, I feel, so that these genres don't go away, so that that rich history doesn't die, so that we continue to learn from that history. And I was thinking about this as well, that like there's so many stories behind spirituals. Like Wade in the Water was used during the Underground Railroad as a way of a method of communication, you know, to say, get in the water because so that the dogs can't get your scent. Just what? And that's connected to a spiritual that we sing about from the Old Testament. You know, people took that for freedom. And then the spirituals that got adopted in the civil rights movement, you know what I mean? Like so many, like We Shall Overcome, which I don't think was a spiritual, was it? I can't remember. We Shall Overcome, Lift Every Voice and Sing, which was written, you know, like the text of that, just Lift Every Voice and Sing, the text of that itself, oh my gosh, like just talk about a song that calls us to action. Hello, read the text of that hymn, like that anthem, just phenomenal. So like how smaller congregations can adopt these multi-genre approaches is, I think, through education and like learning what these genres have done for people, why people have claimed ownership on them as part of their heritage, and what their heritage has gained by using this music, and why it has stuck around for so long. And does that make sense? And like just learning the story behind it, and it's not just a good song.
And that way it becomes appreciation versus appropriation. Right?
Yeah, and not just because I enjoy it, you know. And in the article I speak as well about Callie Day, the artist, African-American artist who came to sing at Central Presbyterian Church January last year, and Jennifer Sengen organized that, and wonderful choral conductor, and she came in, and it was a week that I was just, my sister was here from Ireland. I was so super excited. Her 3 kids were here and her husband. It was crazy. I was teaching all week and I was exhausted. And it was on a Sunday afternoon, and I walked into the room and I was looking to see how I can get out of here. An ultimate Irish goodbye I was planning. The music started and it was all gospel music, and I just could not leave the room. I was immediately just brought to prayer, and the Spirit was in front of me. And don't tell me that I can't find the Spirit in that, because the Spirit took over and I found my faith in that music. So please don't take that away from me. And that's why I would be like, we need to keep these genres alive, and we need to keep these genres going, and we need to appreciate these genres, but we also need to learn why these genres exist, the role they've played throughout history, and the role they play today in the people who claim them as their own, and the important role that they play in our church and our society. And that's, I think, how smaller congregations can adopt these and do them well. Pick something small, pick something simple, and do it well. Don't try some big, huge thing. Just try something small and simple, and you'll be amazed what the Spirit will do from it.
So speaking of the Spirit, we have a few questions from the attendees. And the first one is Spirit-led. How do you decide on repertoire for the choir?
The Spirit. The Spirit does, yeah. I'm constantly looking at repertoire, and this great little thing called my cell phone and the notes app. So I'm constantly making notes of songs that I hear throughout the year and just write them down in a note. But what I try and do is connect a theme for the homeward choir for the whole year. And whether that's like belonging, or whether like last year was our anniversary year. So we tried to, the music that I picked was all stuff that kind of had us looking down through the years, but looking forward as well. So we kind of did a reflection and we did a looking forward. So the music all kind of reflected that. So I kind of try and stick it to a theme, but also the music for the homeward choir also needs to be uplifting and encouraging and positive. So that the singers can latch onto that for themselves and for each other. And so that's how I choose that music. And for my other choirs as well, I try and adopt that as well, that same type of thing. I pick a theme and then I try and latch it onto that.
What a great question. So our second question, and please, if you have any additional questions, ask them.
Should I say thank you, caller?
Otherwise, yeah, we are going to keep talking because we can do that.
Because we can. And we will.
Yeah, exactly. Our second question, also from David Gambrell. Do you know of similar musical groups in other cities?
Yes, I absolutely do. So I'm affiliated with, and I've just stepped down as president of the National Alliance for Musicals in Vulnerable Communities, which has been going on for a number of years. And what it is it's an alliance of groups just like the Homeward Choir, people all over the country from, I already mentioned Chicago, Harmony, Hope and Healing in Chicago, Urban Voices Project in Los Angeles. We have the Norfolk Street Choir, the Queen City Street Choir in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then we have the Central Florida Community Arts Program. There's one in Dallas as well. There's one in Dublin, Ireland. There's so many that are just popping up all over the place. There's some more starting up in, right before the pandemic, one started in South Florida. There's another one starting in somewhere around St. Augustine as well. That's still, they're trying to get it up and running too. So there's so many more. And what I would recommend is that if you're thinking about starting one, do it. when Norfolk contacted me a few years ago and they were thinking about starting up, and it's a wonderful guy, his name is Bob Schaup. My first thing that when he introduced himself and said to me what he was hoping to do, I was like, do it. Just do it. Just do it. Everything else will fall into place. Do you have faith in the Holy Spirit? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, then leave it to the Spirit. The Spirit will take it from there. Just do it and start singing and you'll be amazed. And they've just turned into a program that is just multifaceted. They're both performing arts and now visual arts. They provide services for those people living on the streets that help them with showers, washing their clothes, and other wraparound services too in the community. And just these organizations just blow my mind away. They just completely, and they're all similar and vastly different. Just like completely vastly different. Chicago goes into prisons and they work with prison choirs, and they go into the Cook County Jail. They also go into rehabilitation centers and they work with rehab centers as well as shelters for those unhoused. You know what I mean? So like there's so many different ways of doing this, and they're in so many other places. I'm also talking about trying to set up one in New York City as well, and they're all over the country too. So yeah, in San Diego, there's two in San Diego. So like they're everywhere. There's one up in Seattle. Yeah.
Well, and it's great to know that they're part of a greater group, right? So they can guide you if you want to start one. And
exactly. And the thing is like that we all have collective knowledge, and so when we meet like several times a year, if someone has a question or they need something, if you reach out to me and I don't have the answer, I know somebody who does. And so I refer people over. I'm like, hey, let me connect you with them. What I've been doing for years now. If I know the answer to something, I give it, and freely, like happy to do so. And that's something that we've all agreed to do, that if somebody's trying to start a group for like us, we help them and freely do so and give them whatever resources that we can to, whether that's song suggestions, whether that's organizing a board, applying for 501c3 status, anything at all. The NAMVC has kind of 3 tenets that they work under, and that's networking, advocacy, and there's something else and I can't remember it now off the top of my head, but it's very important too, I'm sure. Education, yes, there we go. Networking, advocacy, and education. Look at me, 2 degrees in education, I forget that one. But it's I think it's vital work, and it's needed, and it's not thought of as something that works, but it just does. It just really, really does. And yeah.
Well, we have 2 more questions. I'm glad the questions are coming. So the next question comes from Stacy, and she says, given the lack of younger churchgoers, how do you balance keeping the more seasoned churchgoers happy while bringing in potential younger non-churchgoers?
That's a great question. I would like to think, first of all, that the more seasoned churchgoers would be delighted to see the new churchgoers coming. I look at especially the church and being in charge of such an old church like the Shrine, is that it's just passing through our hands right now, and that we're in charge of it right now, and that it's our responsibility to pass it on better than what we were given it. Especially stuff like church, because it's going to continue long past us, and it's our job to make sure that it continues long past us. And so I would hope that the churchgoers right now would be all embracing of the new younger churchgoers, to use Stacey's words. But I think that the churchgoers need to be a part of creating the new wheel of invitation, and that the present churchgoers need to be the ones to go out and ask the questions of an invitation, and to give the invitation to the younger churchgoers. They need to be vital in that. They need to be the ones to do the work. It's not an us, them, it's a we. And you know, one of my pet peeves in life is when I hear someone talking about and they constantly use I. Isn't that a cartoon? When you know, one of those like Finding Nemo things or something like that. Wasn't there a seagull or something like that? I'm like always going we. You know, let's go with we, because we can do so much more together. When we're working together, we can get so much more done. Yeah. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Stacey.
Okay, we have two more, so we gotta go as fast as we can. Have you had any members that found housing? And this is from David Iker, not Gabriel. Have you had any members that found housing but continue to sing in the choir?
Yes, we do. Yes, absolutely. What we did was a few years into the Homework Choir, we instituted a program called the Homework Choir Mentorship Program. And that was for people who had found housing and jobs, or one or the other, or either one, a combination of both, but who still came back to the Homework Choir to sing. And what we did was we used those people as peer mentors, to be the ones to talk to the newer folks coming into the choir, because they will be way more relatable to newer folks coming into the choir, because they've sat in the seats that they're sitting in now. And so to see where they're at, and for them to use their expertise, which would be a whole lot more than me, to say, hey, how are you? Are you doing okay? What do you need? Like, is there anything that we can help you with, that we can help you with right now, outside of the huge stuff? And then when people, you know, one of the good things was, you know, being in an organization that is like 11 years old, we've made friends down through the years that over our work, that we can like start referring people to and say, hey, I know who can possibly help you with this, or if you've got this issue, I know maybe this organization here can help you. And there's a lot of phenomenal local organizations who we're able to refer people over to, and we know how they operate, so that we can say, hey, you need to be here at 9 o'clock this time. This is when they bring you, you know, those kind of things that somebody who's newly living in homelessness is unaware of. You know, you come in, you get off a bus, and this happens often. You get off a bus and you don't have a clue what's going on, and you're new in this situation. And those first, you know, 24 to 48 hours of somebody living in homelessness is the most terrifying time, you know. And not saying that they find a choir in that time, but they definitely find someone who they can network with. And hopefully several times they found their way to us. But yes, to answer David's question, we have had several members who have moved out of homelessness and come back to the choir. And right now, with the community choir that we're running and kind of rebuilding after COVID, and we still have two choir members who are with us, who are no longer on the street, but they're still coming back every Friday morning to sing with us. Yeah.
And then our question from Linda. Knowing that you are on the faculty of the 2024 Worship and Music Conference next summer, and doing sessions for adults and for youth, how do we talk with children and youth about how to help think about and talk with persons, sometimes their own age, who they see on street corners in cities and elsewhere? Even adults struggle figuring this out.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Linda. One of the things that I've been focused on a lot in my work in this realm is humanity. And that is kind of putting a face onto people who are living on the streets. And that is showing using music the abilities of people living on the streets. And that is showing what they can do. And showing that musical talent breaks down stigma, and it breaks down any kind of wall that might be there, any wall of inequality that might be there. And I think with young people, somebody singing in front of them is an impressive thing. I remember being in like an elementary grade classroom myself and just wondering how the teacher just stands there and sings at me, you know, like especially being a younger singer, kind of being terrified of singing in front of people, but just the teacher just sang. And like, you know, making a space where the men in the choir at the time were just able to just sing, you know, where now with the community choir, the men and women just get up and sing and people are just like, wow, it sounds so good. Creating that sense of humanity and showing the humanity of folks, though they're not just people who sit in the corner and are invisible, but they're worth so much more than this current situation that they're living in. Another factor would be, to Linda's question, would be to use the music and kind of show young people how music has encouraged change down through the years. And I've already made reference to this. Would be, and something that I'm planning on talking about in the 2024 PAM conference with young people, would be music throughout the civil rights movement, music through how the role spirituals have played throughout our history, and that's throughout our American history. And I'm going to be unapologetic about that. It's our American history that spirituals have played a role in. That might be controversial, but I'm not sorry. It's our American history that these spirituals have played a role in. And we need to be very, very clear about that they were changing times. And we need to be proud of that they still exist in our church today. And that we take this anchor of faith from these spirituals, and that in those spirituals, we see the face of God and we see the face of our faith. And I hope that answers your question, Linda, that we can use both music, we can use the humanity side of things to help people see people. And I think that transcends the barrier of age. And I think that it helps people be people and just community happen. And once community happens, everything else is organic. And you just have to sit back and enjoy, you know, and just know that you only have to do so much work before the Holy Spirit takes over. You know, and that's a gift. That's a gift.
Well, our time has flown because we knew it was going to happen, and we are done with our time. But I would like to finish with a word of gratitude for you, Donal, and the Homeward Choir, and hoping that all of us find home wherever home is. So instead of closing up with a word of prayer, why don't we close up with some of the lyrics of All Are Welcome. And I just chose a random paragraph. Let us build a house where love is found in water, wine, and wheat, a banquet hall on holy ground where peace and justice meet. Here, the love of God through Jesus is revealed in time and space. As we share in Christ, the feast that frees us, all are welcome. All are welcome. All are welcome in this place. May it be so. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. It was great seeing you.
God bless.